I never thought a single evening could change the course of my life, but that night proved me wrong. Rachel and I had been together for nearly 3 years, and I believed I knew everything about her: her favorite songs, the way she laughed at bad jokes, even the subtle twitch in her left eyebrow when she was annoyed. But it turns out, I only knew what she wanted me to see. That night began as ordinary as any other Friday. I left work late, exhausted, craving a quiet night with her, a night of familiarity that would ground me. She greeted me at the door with that smile I had memorized over years, the one that could disarm any worry, even my own. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, the light from the kitchen lamp glinting off the strands like fire. She hugged me, pressed her forehead to mine, whispered, "I missed you." It should have been comforting. It should have reminded me why I had loved her so fiercely. But something in her eyes flickered, a shadow that didn't belong there. I tried to push it away, blaming exhaustion, stress, or perhaps my imagination running wild after weeks of tension at work. Dinner was quiet, the kind of silence where words exist but mean nothing, where the clink of silverware is louder than conversation. I asked her about her day, and she hesitated just for a fraction of a second before saying it was fine. "Fine," she said, but her hand trembled slightly as she poured wine into our glasses, and the slight tremor caught my attention. I hadn't noticed these things before. I should have. After dinner, she suggested we watch a movie in the living room. I noticed her phone buzzing on the counter and her reflexive glance at the screen. She straightened, laughed lightly, and said, "Just a work thing, nothing important." But her laugh didn't reach her eyes. I sat on the couch, pretending not to notice, pretending not to care. My gut tightened. I knew she was lying. I didn't know what about, but the sensation was undeniable. Hours later, she excused herself to the bathroom. That's when I saw it, her phone left unlocked on the counter. My fingers hovered over the device as though touching it would seal my fate. Hesitation lasted only a moment before curiosity overwhelmed reason. I swiped through her messages and found threads with a man named Marcus, playful, intimate, full of private jokes and endearments. My hands shook as I scrolled. The realization hit me in the chest like a hammer. Rachel had been keeping a life from me, one that existed entirely outside of our relationship. I wanted to confront her immediately, to scream, demand explanations, tears and rage mingling into one chaotic storm. But I froze, paralyzed by the weight of the truth. Part of me couldn't accept it, didn't want to believe it. This was the woman I loved, trusted, the one I had envisioned a future with. And yet there it was, proof undeniable that she had been unfaithful emotionally. And maybe more. Sleep didn't come that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I replayed our past, every laugh, every touch, every word. Did I miss the signs? Was it always there, hidden behind the smile, the laughter, the routine? The more I thought, the more I realized how little I actually knew her. Rachel was a stranger in the skin of the woman I loved, and I had been blind. By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't live in ignorance, but I couldn't act recklessly either. I would follow her, observe, try to understand the extent of her deception. Love had blinded me, yes, but fear sharpened my senses. What began as betrayal in my mind was soon evolving into a dangerous obsession, one that would consume days, nights, and every ounce of patience I had left. The story hadn't truly begun yet, but the first pieces of its chaos were falling into place, and there was no turning back. The following days were unbearable. Every time Rachel left the apartment, my mind spun with questions, doubts, and increasingly dark possibilities. I started noticing details I had ignored before: the way she brushed past me when talking on the phone, the hurried way she typed replies late at night, and the subtle flinch whenever I asked casual questions about her day. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was an ache, a constant pressure in my chest that wouldn't relent. I started keeping track of her routine. Not obsessively, at least not at first. I told myself it was precaution, just wanting clarity, but it escalated quickly. I noted her work schedule, the times she left and returned, the people she met. Friends began noticing my distraction, asking if I was okay, but I brushed them off, smiling while my mind churned with images I couldn't shake. Sleep became fragmented. Meals were hastily consumed or skipped entirely. Every waking moment was consumed by the gnawing fear that my life was no longer my own. Then came the first undeniable proof. I saw Marcus again. He approached her with casual familiarity outside a coffee shop, his arm brushing hers in a way I recognized immediately. The kind of intimate gesture reserved only for someone deeply known. My heart sank as I watched from a distance. They laughed quietly, leaning toward each other, exchanging looks that I should have recognized instantly as dangerous. That evening, I drove home numb, staring at the empty streets, the rain-soaked pavement reflecting neon signs I barely registered. I confronted her gently the next morning, carefully asking about Marcus. She smiled, calm and unbothered, and told me he was just a coworker, someone she had known casually. Her composure was infuriating, her ease maddening. Every instinct screamed that she was lying, but how could I prove it without concrete evidence? I wanted to rage, to scream, to pull the truth out of her, but I held back. Fear of what I might discover held me in check. Days stretched into weeks, each one more exhausting than the last. Every casual message on her phone made my stomach twist. I began finding patterns, late-night texts, hurried phone calls, seemingly innocuous meetings that didn't align with her stated schedule. The evidence was piling up, fragment by fragment, creating a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Rachel's duplicity was deliberate, calculated, and my helplessness only amplified the tension. One night I decided to follow her. The city was quiet, slick with rain, the streets empty except for the occasional headlights passing in the distance. I trailed her car discreetly, keeping my distance, heart racing. She parked outside a small, dimly lit building I didn't recognize. Marcus arrived moments later, moving with an ease that made my stomach knot. They entered together, laughter muted but intimate, gestures precise and familiar. I wanted to storm in, confront them, but I couldn't. Fear pinned me in place. Returning home, I felt hollow. Rachel entered, smiling, pretending everything was ordinary. I sat quietly, pretending I hadn't seen, hadn't known. Every laugh, every casual glance, every touch was now poisoned. I realized then that betrayal wasn't just an act, it was a state of mind, a hidden life thriving parallel to mine. Love had blinded me, but now fear and observation dominated every action. And yet I couldn't let go. Part of me still clung to the hope that she would choose me, that the woman I had loved was still inside her somewhere. It was a dangerous hope, one that kept me tethered to a life spiraling out of control. Every plan, every thought, every sleepless night was consumed by the question, how far would she go, and what would I have to do to survive the truth? By this point, I was no longer just living with Rachel, I was living in parallel. One life was the mundane, quiet apartment we shared, where smiles and casual touches masked my growing dread. The other existed in the shadows, trailing her, noting every movement, listening to every snippet of conversation I could overhear. Obsession had replaced trust, and fear had become my constant companion. I questioned my sanity daily, wondering how someone I loved so fiercely could harbor a world so foreign from mine. I began documenting everything. Dates, times, locations, even the smallest hints she dropped. My notebook filled quickly, scrawled in tense, jagged handwriting, a visual map of deception I could barely process. I couldn't confront her directly, not yet. Something told me she was dangerous and any misstep could destroy more than just my heart. Sleep was scarce. I woke to nightmares of Marcus standing over me, Rachel smiling, the room dimly lit, stacks of cash and papers around them. The nightmares felt like memories I hadn't lived yet, premonitions of danger lurking closer than I realized. And then came the night that shattered my fragile control. I followed her to a small motel I had never seen her enter before. She parked, seemingly unaware I was behind her, and moments later Marcus arrived. They entered the room, moving with casual familiarity. I stayed hidden, trembling, my chest tight. Through the blinds, I saw them laughing quietly, exchanging papers and what looked like small envelopes of cash. I didn't fully understand the transaction, but the deliberate way she handled it chilled me. This wasn't just infidelity. It was something calculated, something I had no idea how to navigate. I returned home that night, drenched from the rain, hands shaking, mind racing. Rachel greeted me with her usual warmth, a smile, a hug, a soft "I missed you." I couldn't reconcile the two images, the woman beside me and the woman I had just witnessed. It was a fracture, a split reality, and I was trapped in between. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but fear held me hostage. I realized then that my life, my safety, and perhaps even my sanity were all entangled in her secrets. The days that followed were a tense, suffocating routine. I asked casual questions, pressing gently, probing for inconsistencies. She responded with effortless grace, her eyes avoiding mine in just the slightest, almost imperceptible way. Every answer, every movement was calculated to maintain the facade. I began feeling unmoored, unsure of what was real and what was performance. Even when she smiled, I couldn't trust it. Every touch was contaminated by suspicion. Then the escalation. I discovered more emails, receipts, hidden messages, all pointing to a network I didn't understand, an involvement that was deliberate, extensive, and increasingly dangerous. My gut twisted in knots. I realized that Rachel wasn't just cheating emotionally. She had orchestrated an entire double life. And I, by loving her, had stepped into a web I didn't know how to escape. I was trapped, addicted to observation, addicted to fear, addicted to the hope that maybe, just maybe, she might still choose me over whatever darkness she had created. The story wasn't merely about betrayal anymore. It was about survival, about navigating a labyrinth of deception that had become far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. And as I sat in the darkness, staring at the rain-slicked streets, I knew that the next steps I took would either destroy me completely or give me the chance to reclaim some fragment of my life before it was too late. The tension in our apartment grew unbearable. Every glance, every casual touch from Rachel felt like a lie, a subtle reminder that I no longer shared a life with the woman I thought I knew. I couldn't eat properly, sleep came in shallow fragments, and the walls themselves seemed to close in on me. Friends called, texted, worried, but I waved them off, insisting everything was fine. Fine. A word that no longer had any meaning in the reality I now lived. Then came the night I followed her again. The city was quiet, rain-slick streets reflecting the neon glow of distant signs. She drove to a part of town I didn't recognize, parking in front of a nondescript building. Marcus arrived minutes later, and together they entered, moving with intimate familiarity that twisted my stomach. From the shadows, I watched as they exchanged envelopes, checked phones, and handled cash in ways that felt purposeful, deliberate, almost ritualistic. This was no longer just cheating. It was a life designed to be hidden from me, and every movement underscored her skill at deception. Returning home, Rachel walked in as though nothing had happened, smiling, laughing softly. I tried to mimic normalcy, engaging in shallow conversation, laughing when she did, though every fiber of my being screamed that something was catastrophically wrong. I felt trapped in a dual reality, one in which I still loved her, and one where I feared her. Every moment together became a tension-filled performance, a dance of avoidance and silent observation. I wanted answers, confrontation, clarity, but any action felt dangerous. Days turned into weeks. I tested her subtly, asking questions, gauging her reactions, noting inconsistencies. Her evasions were precise, practiced, professional. I began to fear the depth of her deceit. Rachel had become a master at hiding, controlling, and manipulating, and I had been naive enough to trust completely. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It had become structural, threatening the very foundation of my world. One evening, I stumbled upon a piece of evidence I wasn't prepared for. Hidden beneath her laptop, a small envelope contained stacks of cash and a note with names I didn't recognize. My hands shook, and my heart raced. The woman I thought I loved was part of something much larger, something I couldn't yet define, but which I instinctively understood to be dangerous. The fear I had carried in my chest for weeks now solidified into certainty. I was living with a stranger capable of calculated deception on a scale I couldn't control. I spent that night packing the apartment, the shadows of our life together feeling like a prison. Rachel slept beside me, her breathing calm, her face serene, while my mind raced through worst-case scenarios. I realized that the stakes were higher than mere emotional betrayal. Trust had been destroyed, and with it, my sense of safety. I needed to plan, to prepare, to survive whatever game she was playing before it engulfed me entirely. By the end of that week, I understood one truth. Staying meant danger, leaving meant loss, and navigating the space between would test everything I believed about love, loyalty, and survival. The story had escalated beyond heartache. It was now a battle for clarity, for safety, for some fragment of control in a life dominated by secrets I couldn't yet confront directly. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday night. I parked in the shadows outside the motel, heart hammering, hands tight on the steering wheel. Rachel had left hours earlier and Marcus was due soon. I told myself this would be the last time I followed her. I needed to know the truth, whatever it took. Marcus arrived first, moving confidently, carrying a small duffel bag. Rachel followed, glancing nervously at the street, coat tight around her shoulders. They entered the room together, laughing softly, exchanging glances that made my stomach twist. Through a small gap in the blinds, I saw her sit at the edge of the bed, counting cash, organizing envelopes, checking her phone and a laptop. My mind raced. The depth of her deception stunned me. This wasn't just cheating. It was a deliberate, orchestrated double life, and I was trapped in its shadow. And then it escalated beyond comprehension. Marcus opened a drawer and pulled out a small handgun. Rachel handled it with precision, loading and inspecting it calmly. The casual way she moved, her familiar intimacy with Marcus, and her composed demeanor made my chest tighten with fear. The woman I thought I knew, whom I loved, was gone, replaced by someone calculating, fearless, and untouchable. I stumbled back, shaken, unable to breathe. Confronting her now could be dangerous, and leaving her without answers felt impossible. That night Rachel returned home, her smile intact, voice soft, touching me as if nothing had happened. I lay awake, haunted by the motel, the money, the gun, and the realization that love alone couldn't shield me from the reality of her life. Fear replaced heartbreak. Survival became the only path forward. I knew I had to leave, not just for my heart, but for my safety. By morning, I packed a bag quietly with only the essentials. No explanations, no notes, no final words. I walked out of the apartment, leaving her behind with all her secrets, schemes, and the dangerous world she had created. Walking away wasn't defeat. It was survival, a desperate act to reclaim what she had threatened to destroy: my mind, my life, my freedom. The days after were tentative. I rebuilt slowly, painfully, learning that trust once broken could never be fully restored. Sleep returned, fragile but present. Peace, though tentative, began to fill the void left by betrayal. And though her shadow lingered in memory, it no longer dictated my life. By leaving, I retained everything she sought to control. In that bitter victory, I found strength, a reminder that survival, even when accompanied by heartbreak, was the truest form of justice. Love had blinded me, obsession had consumed me, and betrayal had almost destroyed me. But in the end, walking away allowed me to reclaim myself. And sometimes, that is all that matters.